Welcome to the Dealing with Divorce podcast, where we bring together family law professionals from around Georgia to help give you some insight on how to deal with divorce. Today we've got Jennifer Pinson-Harvey with us. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, good morning to you.
Good morning. So, how are you involved in the divorce process sometimes?
I am the person who tries to make divorce not as painful. I am the peacemaker and the mediator.
And where did you start your educational career?
I'm going to give you a very brief summary. I am a Georgia Bulldog, go Dogs. I got my master's from Emory. All that time I was wanting to go to law school. So I was a congressional staffer, moved up to D.C. and went to George Washington Law School part-time at night, 5 nights a week while working 5 days a week. And even during that time, I remember there was a class offered in something called mediation. I'm like, wouldn't that be cool if you could just sit down and work things out rather than have to go to court and battle it out, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of put it in the back of my head. A few years later, I was in Jacksonville practicing and went to a workers' comp mediation because I was practicing workers' comp at the time. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. Why don't people do that more? Flash forward a few more years, I came to Atlanta. I was with the Olympics, left there, started my own practice while 3 months pregnant, don't ask. And same thing, I was like, I'm starting to do family law. Why can't people try to work things out? And having a baby, it just made me think about, why can't we go a peaceful route? Why does it have to be nasty? Why do we have to have such a fight? And so I took the mediation training. It was sort of an oddity at the time. 1995, this July will be 30 years. I came over here to the Gwinnett Justice Center, mediated a case which I think was like two neighbors fighting with each other, and settled it. And I'm like, I'm in my glory. This is wonderful. And I'm like, I am determined I will become a good mediator. This will be my thing. This is my passion in life. 30 years later, still doing it, still love it most days. But mediation is about trying to help people not part with such animosity. The best comparison I'm going to give you, people say, you do divorces all the time. I'm like, well, that's not the only thing I do. I'm primarily known for family law mediation. You think of someone who is an oncologist, a cancer doctor. They don't like cancer. They're there to try to minimize the pain and make it not as bad as it has to be. That's how I feel. You have to have certain things for mediation. You have to have discovery. There are things that need to be done to prepare for a mediation. A lot of it, I think, is psychological. I feel like I'm more of a psychologist some days than an attorney because I'm neutral. I don't represent either person. I am neutral. I'm there to try to help smooth it out, help people look at solutions so they can go forward. And you asked me a short question, I've given you a marathon answer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So when you say you're neutral, are you neutral like a judge would be neutral?
Correct. I'm not the decision maker. The first thing I tell people in most mediations is I'm not the boss, I'm not the judge. You're the boss. You're the boss. I am not. A judge makes decisions. I don't. A lot of people confuse mediators with arbitrators. An arbitrator is more like a judge in that the arbitrator will render a decision. I do not. If they cannot reach a decision on their own, then they would go to the judge. But I try to encourage them to resolve it where they have the control. I tell people that a lot. If in mediation, you have the control over what's going to happen. A lot of times I get, no, I don't have the control. Other person is in charge. I'm like, no, they're not. No, this is where you both can say what's going to happen. You know your children, your money, your house, your life better than anything else. I'm thinking I have a business mediation this week too. Same thing. You know your business. You know better than anybody else. You know better than some judge sitting up there in a robe who has a list of cases. However, some people need to have that judge tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that discovery needs to be done before mediation. Is that something that someone who's going to mediation would send you in advance?
I normally do not like to get anything in advance. I don't really need it. There's no point in it. I can pick things up pretty quickly. Um, the reason for the discovery, a lot of times the dispute is who's going to get the house? How are we going to divide the retirement plan? Well, if we don't know what's in the retirement plan, if we don't know the value of the house, if we don't know what's owed on the mortgage, if we don't know what the debts are, how do you reach a settlement on something when you don't have information?
And so the discovery, you're saying they get in the background and then they would come to mediation with notes and like an
Yes.
outline to provide
What
to you?
is beautiful, and this is something that helps me a lot, if the attorneys come to mediation and they have a marital balance sheet, that saves hours. But have a marital balance sheet that backs it up with the statements. Here's the most recent 401k statement, for example.
Yeah.
That helps a lot. If you come into mediation and you don't have any information, it's kind of hard to settle because you don't know what you're coming on. Now, if it is child issues, that might be a little bit different because with children, we know kind of what we're looking at with children. That's different.
And so what's the setting of mediation normally like?
Okay. Most of my mediations in this era are on Zoom, about 95%. They all used to be in person prior to the pandemic. One thing I do that not all mediators do, I keep the parties separate. My typical day is everyone logs on Zoom. I immediately put one attorney and client in a breakout room. I then put the other attorney and client in a breakout room. I do not let them see each other. I have been criticized more times than I care to tell you over the years for doing it this way. The other 99% of people are like, please do it that way. If people want to be together, I'm happy to put them together in a breakout room. If the attorneys, sometimes I need to talk to the attorneys privately, but I generally have different rooms. If I'm in person, same thing. One is in one room, one is in another room. I go back and forth. I have found that to be a lot more productive, a lot more successful. In cases of any domestic violence, whether it's real or it's maybe minimal, I've had people thank me many times. Thank you. I did not want to see her. I didn't want to look at him.
Yeah, that can reawaken the trauma and put them in a whole state of mind.
Thank you. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah. And so one of the first things that you'll ask people when they're going into mediation is to sign some mediation guidelines. Can you explain what that is?
The mediation guidelines are the rules for mediation. The cases I do are usually connected to a court. I'll use Gwinnett, for example. Gwinnett has a set of detailed guidelines and rules. They say things like, lay fault and blame aside. We're not here to argue about who did what. Of course, in mediation, I hear a lot of fault and blame. But the point, though, is that you're not to sit and the other person. You are to, and it says, be open and honest with the mediator. One thing that's very critical in mediation that I discuss when I go over guidelines, if you're there with your client and you say, Jennifer, we don't want you to share this with the other room, I am bound by that confidentiality. It's one of the most important aspects of my role. My experience is it normally comes out before the mediation's over anyway, but if there is a secret or something that we don't want told, I need to honor that. That's very, very important. In the guidelines, I tell like what my fee is. Parties normally split my fee 50-50. I tell people I try not to drag it out. I like to get it done. Most people are worried about, they'll get on the guidelines and they look at what they have to pay. And that's a very valid concern. If I'm paying somebody by the hour, I want them to go ahead and zip and keep moving. So I try to reassure people I'm not the one that's going to drag it out. On the guidelines, there are other things on there, like, for example, I don't go to court and testify. My notes, which are generally illegible anyway, are confidential. These are not things that get admitted as evidence in court. So that's just kind of a sample of what's on the guidelines. I have the parties sign and any attorneys sign. While I'm on that topic, people ask me, does everyone always have an attorney? I love it generally when both sides have attorneys. I find it's easier. Some people, for various reasons, don't have an attorney. They can't afford an attorney. They Some people think that they just don't need one. There are many, many reasons. What I have to clarify in the guidelines, I am not your attorney. I am an attorney, but I cannot represent you. I am what? Neutral. And many times I encourage people, sometimes we just don't make progress without an attorney. I'll be like, go and do a 1 hour consultation. Go and get some legal advice. And I ask them, would you go to the hospital for surgery without the doctor? So that's something I encourage. All of this is a part of the guideline discussion.
Mm-hmm. And so, has anyone in your family or anyone you know ever been impacted by family law?
Yes, I have had a number of friends who have been divorced. My parents did not divorce ever, but they fought all the time. One of my memories of being a little girl, I had two brilliant, wonderful parents who were always, they were both so smart, but they fought a lot. I can picture myself standing between them. Y'all, stop. It doesn't matter. Why don't we blah, blah, blah. So I guess I was a natural mediator as a little kid. Mm-hmm. They stayed married 49 years despite all their fighting. But so I did not grow up with a divorce situation. I have friends who did. Many of my friends have divorced. Many people in family law are like, I come from a blended family. I grew up the child of divorce. That is not me, but I think I was exposed to it enough to where I'm very sensitive to it. And again, you have to be sensitive, particularly in family law. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are hurting. People get mad. I get yelled at quite often. Sometimes by the attorney, sometimes by the parties. It's very tense, it's very emotional, and sometimes you just have to let it roll off of you because people are struggling.
So in the same sense that you said you're like an oncologist, you don't want people to go through these things, but you're there for them when they do.
Right.
In that same line, in seeing your grandparents and their long marriage, is there anything that you learned that you could maybe share that would help people in avoiding divorce?
I'll take it more directly to me. My husband and I have been married right at 32 years, which is quite unbelievable to me. It's hard. Being married is hard work. It's one of the hardest things any of us ever do. I think sometimes you have to lay off. You just can't, you just have to let some things go. We've always gone to church together. That's I think your faith is huge. That's not always the answer either. I think you have to communicate. That can be difficult. Sometimes you have to put each other as first in a lot of ways. The problem is so many of the cases I see, people, even if they do communicate, even if they have all these good factors, I see a lot of drug abuse. Many of my cases, there is someone, and sometimes both parents, sadly, are heavily into drugs. I see a lot of alcoholism. I do see abuse, physical abuse, more likely though mental abuse. I see.
And is that something that a marriage can survive?
I've seen it survive and I've seen it not survive. There is a lot of mental illness. Some people get treatment and can get past this. I know people who are married to someone who's an alcoholic or a drug addict and they have been able to get past it. Infidelity. I've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That is, very high percentage of the cases I see. Marital infidelity. When I got married, I'm like, this is for life and there is no one else. It's for afterlife. It's forever. A lot of people do not have the commitment. A lot of people have the commitment and so many things happen. Life happens. People grow in separate directions. Part of my focus is to keep it as amicable as possible. When I was first practicing in Gwinnett, I was the uncontested divorce queen. A lot of people just need to go their separate ways for different reasons. It doesn't have to be a battle. It doesn't have to cost a fortune. Sometimes and you see this with your firm, some people can come to you, it's amicable, you draft the paperwork, people peacefully go their own way. When I work as a mediator, those are the ones that wasn't so easy. They need help. So
So I've heard this phrase, and I'm sure everyone has. Don't kill the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yes.
How does that happen to you?
I said it. I had a case last week. I had two attorneys who were very wonderful. It got a little heated. They were not real happy with each other. And one is like, blah, 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 blah. I go in the other breakout room, blah, 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 blah. And I'm in, yeah, blah, 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 yeah. Finally, that's exactly what I said. Don't shoot the messenger. Look, I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to help you resolve it. If you're angry, I got it, but let's go forward so we can get this case resolved. We did settle it. I literally collapsed afterwards. Yeah, sometimes I will tell people, I'm not the punching bag. I'm the mediator. I'm not. I use that phrase a lot. I'm not your punching bag. If you want to run something off of me, that's fine. If I make a mistake, if I misstate something, yell at me all you want. I don't care. But I'm not the punching bag. I find a lot of people like to vent their frustrations on the one who's trying to be in the middle to help them. It's part of the job. You get used to it.
Do more attorneys get really emotionally involved with their clients, or are more of them able to kind of control their demeanor?
Most, I think, do really well. Many mediations, everybody's calm, but there one time something will get heated, it calms back down. Attorneys are here to zealously represent their clients. They're trying to help their clients. I find most attorneys I work with are really good in this era. I'm really impressed. I find most are very dedicated. They just want to help their client. The problems I have are a lot of times when one attorney doesn't like the other attorney. That's what I deal with far too often. And they're just bitter at the other attorney because the other attorney mistreated them in some other case or something like that. But I'm like, that's not this case. Let's leave it home.
So what are the odds of settlement if two attorneys are going at it as opposed to you? How do you help in those situations?
Makes it more difficult. Well, that's part of why I keep people separate. I try to get to refocus. I'm constantly refocusing. Sometimes the client will say, okay, I don't care. I just want to get this settled. I know you're trying to get me $50,000, but I'll really take $25,000 if we can settle it. I try to make the client back in charge. Dealing with different attorney personalities is one of my most challenging parts of mediating. And again, I love most people I work with. At a certain point, I'll see certain names come up and I'll be like, okay, have your caffeine today. But a lot of times it's how you talk to people. And again, I try to redirect, be it a client, an attorney, whoever I'm working with.
Are there any, I think personal development and investing into yourself is really important. Are there any, I like to ask for book recommendations for, either divorcing spouses or parents of children who are going through family law problems. Are there any books that you could recommend?
Not in particular. That at one time I was keeping up with the books, not so much now. I recommend for people who go to church, if they can go to like a divorce care class or something like that. I like to see children in counseling. I've had a lot of people go online and research things. Some people will read books. The Navigating Family Change classes that divorcing parents go to, those are great. I have actually been through a couple of those just for mediation training. Anything you can go to outside of the legal realm, be it counseling, support groups. I encourage people, if they have a good friend network, my clients and mediation participants I've seen who have a close network, a close bond with friends, that support network. It may be a family network. That is so critical. And I know there are different books that people can read that will go into more of this, but I think you need that extra help. I think it helps people. People are in pain. I think it helps with some of the healing.
Is there any wisdom from your grandparents and their worldview and how they've impacted your worldview? Any wisdom that you would share? I'm
just thinking, both sets of my grandparents were married for many years, and I think we're happy. My parents were. I guess they were happy. I think in those generations, you stayed married no matter what. You got married. That's the way it was. If you were happy, fine. If you weren't, fine. I don't think we have the level of commitment now. I think, and I'm on Facebook a lot, but I think social media causes a lot of division. I think if from that era, and I'm going to argue this both ways, from that era, they would say you made the commitment. My grandparents, my parents, and I did that. But some people made that commitment and stayed in
Some would
lives
say a
of
covenant,
misery.
you know?
It's a covenant.
Exactly.
But let me give you the other side of it. What if you did marry somebody and for many reasons it didn't work? I heard of people of my parents' and grandparents' generations who would stay together in misery for years. I've done a lot of uncontested divorces, and what I've told clients is life is too short to be that miserable, particularly if you don't have children. Sometimes you need to get out of a bad situation and go forward with your life. Getting divorced doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that you were in a marriage that hasn't worked. So I can also argue that maybe people need to be freed out of an unhappy situation. Maybe life is too short to be in that situation. Some of the older people's generations might have been like, But I can argue it both ways because I've seen it. I've seen clients of mine who came to me and they were so miserable, and I'll run into them a few years later and they're like a different person. They're so happy. And so, see, you have to look at things at both sides.
Yeah.
I've learned don't judge people. Unless you have been in that person's shoes, don't sit around and judge. I'm not very judgmental for that reason because sometimes you don't understand. And then some people are just, well, you get it.
Amen to that. So, what about in your professional life? Who has been a mentor to you or had an impact on your professional thoughts? You know, either in D.C. or in Georgia and Gwinnett, that you could give a shout out to.
Many people. I don't have just one or two. I have a long list. My first job out of college was with Senator Sam Nunn, who was a U.S. Senator. I was an intern and then worked for him handling Social Security cases. And he was very moderate, always very fair. Every time I talked to him, he was always like, look at both sides of things. And that, probably more than any one person, I would say it would have to be him.
All right.
My parents, I'm not really telling the good on them. They were both very smart people, and they were very wonderful. They always were very encouraging and were trying to push me to really get an education, which is something I push really hard to. I have to give them a lot of credit as well. Many attorneys have taught me a lot over the years. Just for an example, your father, Tony, was one of the people who would teach me a lot about family law, and Tony would let me know his thoughts, good or bad, on things, but that was helpful. Sometimes I learned I've needed people to teach me things. We don't know it all. Even now, I'm like, I've done this a lot of years, and I still see new issues come up that I wouldn't have even thought about. You know, social media, when I first started, didn't exist. Now it's huge. Mm-hmm. So I can thank a lot of people for what they've done to get me to this point.
And what areas do you serve? What court systems do you mediate in?
I am all over. Gwinnett here would be my primary one. I do a lot of work up in the 9th District, Hall County, Forsyth County, the mountain counties. I do a fair number of juvenile cases, and a lot of the mountain counties, a lot of poverty, really need help very badly. The courts pay me for those. DeKalb, I actually live in DeKalb now. I do a lot of private cases in DeKalb, Fulton, still some in Cobb. So I'm kind of, when you mediate, you can kind of be all over. I know Gwinnett best because this has always been my home base. Mm-hmm. But I try to learn who the judges are, learn about them. I think it helps in mediation if you know a little bit about the judge. A lot of our judges have changed in every county. That makes it more challenging. With new judges, we don't know what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. But Gwinnett is still my home base, though.
And if someone, one of the Gwinnett citizen, needed a mediator, needed to contact you, how would they do that?
Most of the cases I do come from, most of they come through from their attorneys. I usually say, get your attorney to contact me. The Gwinnett ADR office, which is wonderful, I've worked with them for 30 years. They assign a lot of the mediations. I will get some people who will contact me. They'll say, we've heard you're a good mediator, and they'll send me an email. I'm like, well, tell me who your attorney is. We'll set it up. You have a case pending. No, we just want to try to work it out, and we don't want to we don't like attorneys. We don't want to go to court. And I'm like, okay, because as a mediator, I don't represent either one of you. Sometimes I've ended up making those uncontested divorces. Normally, though, I'm like, I want you to go and consult with an attorney. As a mediator, I cannot give the legal advice, even if I know it, which I usually do, I can't give it. So
do people actually mediate before filing for divorce sometimes?
Oh, yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes they do. And that's great. Again, I still like for them to have legal advice. Some people say, let's just go ahead, try to work it out. In those cases, normally those are not too contentious. They just need somebody to help them sort through the process.
And in the busier times of the year, how far out are you booked for mediation?
At this point, I am, let's see, we're toward the end of March. I am booked right now pretty much to the beginning of May.
Okay.
That's be the hardest part of my work, scheduling. I am mostly booked throughout April. Invariably, 30-40% of those are going to cancel.
Really?
Because different reasons. Attorneys have court conflicts. The case settles. Last month, I think I had 2 reconciliations. There are all different reasons why they cancel. My calendar is a constant chicken scratch. People will say, we need you on X day, and X day. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm booked on those. Then they end up canceling. Well, by then they've booked somebody else. Scheduling any legal assistant who works in the offices who work with me will tell you that's probably their biggest headache too, is trying to get the cases scheduled. How long is a mediation going to last? That's a scheduling issue. Some cases we really need all day. Some we can easily do in 3 or 4 hours. I really try to move it. That is probably the single hardest part of my job is scheduling. So.
And then at the end of mediation, how do you collect payment? What kind of payment do you take?
I take everything. After the pandemic, I take Zelle, Venmo, Cash App, because we couldn't be in person for so long. I take credit cards, debit cards with a little fee. I've learned most people now seem to want to pay either by Zelle or by credit card. And I try to be very flexible.
All right.
And I try to really watch my clock and I'm not into overcharging people. This is hard work. I want to get paid well, and I am paid well. But be fair with people too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I'll talk all day, but I have mediations ahead of me today.
All right. This has been the Dealing with Divorce podcast. See you next time.